Yeah, right. And it happens fast, right? Right. So, I was out on Lake Houston not too long ago, me and my Ashley and my brother-in-law, because we wanted to get some catfish. So we do something that's called jugging. Have y'all ever heard of that? You get a little thing that basically floats and it has a hook on it. You bait it, and you just kind of set them out in a line. And then once the fish bites it, you'll see them kind of swimming away, these little floating devices. So we were the only ones out there, and this is a big lake. But it's because everybody else heeded the warnings about the weather. and we were determined that we're going to get some catfish. So, and we just had a little window of opportunity. So we get them all set out, and sure enough, we could see it coming. So we're like, oh, it's about to get bad. And then, so sure enough, as soon as that wind starts blowing, the waters immediately just start getting extremely rough. And we're, of course, in a motorboat, so we have a little bit of a speed advantage. But we're definitely popping along, hitting waves and trying to get to some shelter. And so it does happen really quick. So what happens to these guys? Okay, is that a problem? Right, so the boat is filling up with water, right? And why is it filling up with water? Right, so waves are breaking. So this is getting really bad, right? Waves are breaking over the boat. It's filling up with water. Is everybody dry? No. How do you know that? Because they're in the boat with all the water, right? So if the waves are breaking over the boat, they're also breaking over them. And where's Jesus? Right. It says he's in the stern. I'm not a boat guy. What's the stern, the front or the back? Back, right? Okay, that's what I thought. I don't want to act like I know something I don't. So he's in the back asleep. He found a nice little cushion to sleep on. Why do you think he is asleep? Thank you. He is tired, right? Because, yeah, if you look over in chapter 1, just for one example, it says in verse 32, when the evening had come, after the sun had set, right? So the sun's gone down. It says they began bringing to him all who were ill and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city gathered at the door. And he healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out demons. And he was not permitting the demons to speak because they knew who he was. Then it says, in the early morning, while it was still dark, he got up and went to a lonely place to pray. So is he getting a lot of sleep? Right. So who knows how long he was. We don't even know if he did sleep, but it says he got up. Right. Right. So this is all starts after the sun sets. Then everybody decides to show up. I imagine because they have jobs and stuff. And then before it comes up again, he kind of gets off to a lonely place. So, and then they're out hunting for him. Like, where are you? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure he's just thinking, can a guy get a break? So that's happening over and over again with Jesus. Again, crowds are pressing in on him. So it doesn't surprise me that he has crashed out in the middle of all this, right? Just getting sleep when he can. So, what happens? Has anybody ever been woken up from a dead sleep? Are you with it? And it looks like I'm sure that's what happened to him, right? I'm just kind of guessing here a little bit, right? But just having been really tired before and being woken up right when you hit like deep sleep, it takes a second, right, to kind of catch your snap. And it says being aroused, what does he do? Right. He rebukes the wind and talks to the sea, and he's like, hush, be still. And what happens? Right. It says it becomes perfectly calm. And everybody started clapping and rejoicing, right? What's their reaction? Yeah, they're frightened. And what are they asking themselves? Right. Right. So that's kind of bizarre, right? For everything to be like, just like that. And all he did was just say the words, and it happened. So I'll tell you another story. All right. So when I was in college, I liked to play pranks on my roommates for some reason. And one of my roommates had a cassette of a storm that you would like go to sleep to or whatever. And so it just starts off as a nice little rain shower, and then it slowly builds to this full-on storm, right? So I thought it would be funny to wait for my roommate to fall asleep. Another one who didn't know about the tape. There's 4 of us. And so me and the roommate that owned the cassette, am I dating myself when I say cassette? All right. It's a little thing that you put into all right, anyway. So I'm like just kind of waiting, and my other roommate falls asleep because he doesn't have the tenacity that I do to make this thing happen. So I wake him up, and I'm like, hey, we got to play it, right? So, and there's a speaker, and okay, again, dating myself, we had big speakers back in those days, and there was one right by his head, over by his bed. So I get this rainstorm going, and I'm just hoping he'll wake up and look out the window and go, oh, it's not raining, but I hear all this, right? And nothing's happening. So finally I just crank it really loud, and it's boom, right? And that would normally wake people up, by the way, just even a real storm, right? But, and he sits up, and he sits there for a second, and then he just lays back down. He doesn't look out the window. And I was like, oh, come on. So this thing is in the middle of a raging storm. So I just take the volume, turn it all the way off, just like that, right? Then he sits up again. And then I just busted out laughing because it was even better than I had envisioned. You know what I mean? Because we went from a full raging storm to like dead quiet. And that's not normal, right? And so, and then he looked over at me and was like, dude. So, anyway. But these guys are afraid, right? Because I don't know what all was happening as far as the storm. We know it was a strong wind, and the waves are breaking over the boat, and it was enough to get them, like, concerned. By the way, when they woke up Jesus, what did they say? Right. I think the song says, carest thou not that we perish? Do you think they said it like that? It's like, get up, we're going to die. So these guys are concerned for their lives. And Jesus calms it, right? All right. So they get to the other side, and everything's happy, right? Where do they end up on the other side?
A man with an unclean spirit.
Right. Where?
In the tomb.
Right. So, not great, right? So tell me about this guy with the unclean spirit. What do we know about him? Okay, right. And what's it say about his strength? Right. So people tried to subdue him. I'm assuming to help him, maybe, because what is he doing? What does it describe him as doing?
Crying out and cutting himself with stones.
Right. So he's a cutter, right? Why would people do that to themselves?
Today we would say he had a mental illness, but back then it was a demon.
Right. Social worker? Why do people do that?
Well, because they're an internal demon, and it's a way for some people to relieve pain.
So it helps them relieve some of that pain that they're going through that maybe, anguish they just can't get help for, right? So the guy is in serious, and it looks like he's been like this for a while, right? So it's so much so that he lives by himself in this tomb area, crying out in anguish, and people have tried to subdue him, and they can't because he breaks the chains. And he runs up. Oh, and it says in verse 5, how often does this happen? Right. Constantly, night and day, among the tombs and the mountains. He's crying out and he's gashing himself with stones. So he sees Jesus. What's he do? Right. He runs to him and bows down before him. And that's happened before this. If you go back through chapter 1 and following, the people that were demon possessed, what did the demons know? Right. They know who he is. We know that from James, right? James says, even the demons believe and shudder. So the demons know who he is. And they go and they bow before him. And does Jesus want them talking about who he is yet? The answer is no. I don't know if it's in here or not. But if you read before, he's always telling them to be quiet and don't say who he is. But he's been telling them to come out of this guy. He asked the demon for a name, and what's the name? Legion, right? Because, right, there's many of them, right? So the demons don't want to be sent just off into an abyss or whatever. So they ask permission to go where? Into a large herd of pigs or swine, depending on your version. And he says, he gives them permission. They do that, and what happens to all the pigs? Boom, right? They just rush down the side of the hill or the mountain into the water, and they drown. So, and then there's people that are out watching these pigs, right? And what do? Right. Because is this weird, unusual, strange? Right. Yeah. So, so typical farmer. Noticing the real problem here is their products has all just been, yeah. Okay. So they go and then everybody comes out to see what's going on. What do they find, or who do they find with Jesus? And describe that for me. Verse 15. Right. So the demon-possessed man is sitting with Jesus. He's got clothes on. He's, for some reason in my mind, I picture him like a three-piece suit, all nice and looking. I know they didn't have that back then, but that's just what my mind conjures up when I see that he goes from, the horrible condition that he's been in all this time, and nobody's been able to do anything for him, to now he's sitting there. He's got relief, right? He's probably for the first, who knows how long he's been this way. And he's finally able to just sit there in peace. And it says in his right mind, so he hasn't been in his right mind. And he's just been tormented this whole time. So how does that affect everybody? Right. So again, what do they tell Jesus? Right. They're like, can you go away now? Because they're a little freaked out by this whole thing. And the demon-possessed guy, right, he wants to go with Jesus. And he says, no, go home. And I'm sure, the guy has people that are, that miss him and love him. So I feel like just looking at it from a humanitarian point of view, that is the right thing to do. Send him back to his family, let him enjoy this person that he is now, because they haven't been able to do that for who knows how long. And so he goes back home. So they go back over again in the boat, and verse 21, who comes out to meet them? Right, a great multitude. All again, the guy can't go anywhere. A whole multitude comes out again, and then another person comes up to him, and who is this guy? Right, and what's significant about him? Right. What's his job? Okay, verse 22, right? So he's one of the synagogue officials named Jairus, I don't know how you say that. And he comes up to him and he falls at his feet. Remember, there's like people everywhere, right? So this guy didn't care. Does he care? What's he care about? Cares about his daughter, right? And pleads with Jesus because what's he say, verse 23? Right, because she's right at the point of death, right? So he wants him to come heal her. So he goes, and everybody's around him. And again, there's such a large crowd. What is happening? Right. Everybody's pressing in on him, right? It's hard to move. And this is why he started going out into the unpopulated areas in the first place, right? Because it just got so crazy in the cities that he just needed a little space, right? And in the middle of all that, somebody else comes up to him. Who comes up to him in all this commotion? Right. I don't know if y'all can hear her. Somebody in the back, tell me who comes up to him. Thank you. Right? So with a hemorrhage or discharge of blood, whatever it is, how long has she been suffering with that? 12 years, right? And anybody been able to help her? No. Have they made it better? How have they made it? They made it worse, right? So she is, and what's her thought process?
She heard reports about Jesus.
And right. So all she's thinking is, if I can just touch like the end of his garment, the hem of his garment, then I'll be healed, right? So, that's pretty awesome thinking, actually, right? Impressive. And she does it, and does it work? Yes, it does work. And does Jesus know this has happened? So what is he doing now? Right. He's like, and what are the disciples saying? Right. Dude, everybody's touching you. What are you talking about? So they don't realize what's happened, right? She knows what's happened, and Jesus knows what's happened, and that's it. But Jesus is suddenly stopped, right? Jairus is like, we're going this way, right? Because he's still focused on his daughter. But Jesus, now the thing has stopped, and Jesus is looking around to see who touched him. So she comes forward, right? And she thinks she's probably in trouble. And what does he tell her? Right. So, verse 34, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. While that is happening, other people are coming up now. And what are they saying to Jairus? And? Right. Does that seem insensitive? That seems a little insensitive to me. That they're like, maybe they thought he was just bothering him in the first place, right? So, Jairus is, he's hearing all this stuff about Jesus, just like everybody else, right? His daughter is on her deathbed, essentially, and there's nothing they can do for her. He goes out of his way to work his way to beg Jesus to come help her. And these people are like, hey, she's dead, quit bothering him. Like it's been a bother this whole time, right?
Well, but I don't know, because it says that they came from the ruler's house.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones who said, there's no reason to trouble the teacher.
Right. But I'm just saying, it just seems a little callous. Yeah. I just don't, I agree. I think Jairus thought it would work, right? So, how does Jesus take that? Right. So he overhears it, right, in verse 36, and he says, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe." He continues on, and he just brings Peter, James, and John, and Jairus and his wife, and they go in there, right? And as they go into the house or wherever they're at, what does he encounter? Right. So there's a large commotion, and what does he tell them? Right. So he says, she's not dead, she's just asleep, and then they laugh at him, right? Because he didn't know what he's talking about. So only those few people enter the room, and he takes her hand and he says, English version. Right. So he just tells the little girl to arise, and immediately she gets up and she begins to walk. How old is she? She's 12 years old. And what's the reaction of the people? Right. Completely astounded, amazed. They can't believe it. And he says, hey, you might want to get her something to eat. Right. Oh, right. So strict orders that no one should know about this. So we have here a series of events of Jesus doing some pretty amazing things, right? So in the last few minutes that we have, what are some things that, what are some applications for us? Right.
And in all these stories, these kind of hopeless situations, people turned to Jesus and found hope. And that application is, same for us that whatever trouble we're facing, whatever storms we're facing, Jesus is still the answer. And although he's not here in bodily form, he can still save us.
Right. So it's easy to have faith when things are going great, right? When does it become difficult to have faith?
When things are not going great.
Good. Right. So I kind of gave you the answer. When things are, yes, go ahead.
What I see in all of these is adding to what Ron said, but all of these people sought Jesus out. They acted on a faith they didn't understand, but they had enough. They knew without a doubt they could just reach this man named Jesus and draw near to him and ask him in faith for whatever it was they wanted. They just knew. They knew more than the disciples did that they were going to achieve what they were asking for. And think about the woman. Where did she have to be in order to touch the hem of Jesus' garment? She had to be down to the ground. She was down there on her hands and knees,
Right.
working toward his hem.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes maybe we need to do that. Because Jesus, what did he say over and over? Follow me, follow me, follow me. That's not a one-time event.
Mm-hmm.
We follow him all the days of our life. We have to choose that every day. We have to choose to draw near to him. And the path is always easy because he's there, just like he was there for these people who didn't know him.
Right. Right. So, yeah, she was doing whatever she could just to reach out and grab a hold of his coat or whatever, tunic, and just thought, this is like my last hope, right? Like they're hearing the stories of people being healed, miraculous stories. who is this guy? And they're kind of afraid, like, that's strange. I don't understand what's happening. Think about recent tornadoes we've had, right? If that's happened to you, is it hard to have faith in a situation like that? It is. It can be, right? It can be overwhelming. When you're going through an overwhelming tragedy or some type of event like that, just from a real storm, right? Not the storms that we think about as just the turmoil in our own lives or whatever. It would be difficult to, I think, have faith, but that's when, that's when your faith is kind of tested, and we need to understand that Jesus can still help us in all those situations. Go ahead.
So in the story in the boat, one of the things I thought about, he's sleeping through this, and part of the reason is because he's so tired, but also that he's not worried about the storm.
That's true.
So when we're dealing with those things, we're going to the one who, although it may seem like too big of a problem for us, it is not too big of a problem for him. He's not worried about it in the sense that he has compassion for us, but he's not worried about it because he knows he can take care of it.
Right. So, yes, he is the one who's in control, right? And that's what we see over and over again. What is he, just from these stories, what is he in control of? Good. Who said that? I knew it. All right. That's true, right? Everything, right? He controls nature, right? Because he created it, right? He controls demons. So he's got power over the physical world, the spiritual world, right? Over disease and death. So he's in control of all of it. So he is the one to go to at all times. Go ahead, Cena. Mm-hmm.
And while we don't think to access that, sometimes he's doing his job.
Right.
We need to be in tune with that. And that takes some growth. Really it does.
Yes.
It takes years to hone in on some of that because it's so far beyond most of our mental abilities to pick up on that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
Right.
I think it's instinct to, in our culture, to fight everything that's going against what we want
Mm-hmm.
at that moment. And sometimes the things that we want aren't good for us at any time, or maybe at that particular time.
Right.
So we have to trust that God knows best for us.
Right.
Put that faith there.
Is God going to heal us of everything? Does that mean that maybe that faith was misplaced? No, because doesn't he know better than we do, right? And he just wants us to trust him. Just trust him no matter what. So, we could be facing some kind of horrible diagnosis, right? That does not sound good. But we just keep our faith in God, right? Even if we die, faithful until death. It doesn't matter,